Welcome to the next session. I want to present Andrew Elder, who is now retired general practitioner from London. I have heard him 2.5 years ago on the big medical fair Läkarstämman i Stockholm for, as I said, 2.5 years ago, and I found he put words to something that we all know and experience and have experienced, but we rarely have the opportunity to find it so well formulated, and that is why we thought it is very good, important to invite him to let us hear his words about the sort of relationships that you can establish with your patient and your patients with you, how this is working and why and who is in this thing. And so, Andrew, please come up and give us a presentation.
Thank you very much, Marcus, and the organisers for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here, and very nice to see so many people, although actually slightly daunting as well, I suppose. You know, we're used to one-to-one experiences in the consulting room, aren't we? But so I will do my best to make what I'm going to say accessible at a personal and individual level. It's always a pleasure to be in Sweden. As Marcus knows, I have 2 Swedish grandchildren, and my efforts to speak even the rudimentary Swedish makes them absolutely crack up with laughter. So I'm afraid I'm a very long way from being able to address you in Swedish. I was very lucky to be a GP in one place for 36 years. And towards the end of my time, I became very interested in what I'll refer to again later in more detail, which is attachment theory. The work that really derives from John Bowlby in the 1960s, those of you who are familiar with it, and it doesn't matter a damn if none of you are familiar with it. I will do my best to explain it. And like any theory, it needs to be absorbed into our particular world of being GPs, which I think is rightly very suspicious of theory and has to absorb ideas that are useful to us and made sort of useful in our particular context. But what attachment theory deals with are the patterns of security and insecurity that underlie all our lives, really. I travelled up from Stockholm by train, and I woke up at 6 o'clock or something like that, looked out of the window, and there I was in the sort of northern Swedish forests and the snow-clad surroundings, thinking, oh my goodness, I'm a long way from home. And then immediately anxiously thinking, gosh, what do I really know about the Swedish medical system? Zero. And wondering therefore whether this peculiar perspective of being a GP for a long period of time in one place would have any meaning, because it is increasingly having less and less meaning in the UK. But out of the next door sleeping compartment, and I hope she won't mind me mentioning her, came the lovely Dr. Masha from southern Sweden, who was going to this conference, so we started talking, and within about 2 minutes I began to feel much more at home. We were immediately talking about the same sorts of things. And being around in the conference today, I've heard conversation about politicians leaning on GPs to ask them all about their lifestyle every time they see them. Same thing in the UK. People complaining about general practice being made into a business rather than looking after patients. Same as the UK. The problems of what we call the quality outcome framework, which is really our system for incentivizing doctors to do certain things that politicians want them to do, many of which are, of course, valuable, but once you apply a strong incentive in one direction, maybe there are costs in another. So many of the same themes. It's amazing, wherever you travel and you talk to fellow GPs, you end up very often talking about similar things. Now, back to attachment theory. It's quite extraordinary, I think, that if you go into a room called psychiatrists, psychologists and child psychiatrists, and you mention attachment theory and John Bowlby, everybody in the room knows what you're talking about. This is not a criticism of us. You then go next door into a room called the rest of medicine, medical practice, and very few people know much about it. GPs, of course, take a lead in trying to understand things about our relationship with patients. But if you go into the general corpus of medical institutions and you mention John Bowlby's work or attachment theory,